Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. My name is Robert. I'll be your host. This is the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas history and culture trip, where we're going to be talking about the group trip that we're going to be taking on Memorial Day weekend. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Robert Kelleman, and I will be your host, and we're going to be talking about Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. So thanks so much for joining us. If you're not familiar with the overview of this program, that's really designed for people that are going with us on our Dallas-Fort Worth Memorial Day weekend 2022 group trip, or at least people that are thinking about it. Now, you don't have to be going on the trip to get something out of this program. If you're going to be going to Dallas-Fort Worth on your own at some point in time, we'll talk about a lot of different travel related things that may be of interest. If you're considering moving to Dallas-Fort Worth or some other part of Texas and just want to learn more about that metro area, this will also be helpful for you. And if you're just interested in learning more about Texas in general, this program will help you. So you don't necessarily need to be going on our group trip to get something out of this program. So thanks so much for being here. And Texas is a very iconic place. It has such strong perceptions in people's minds. When you think of Texas, probably all different kinds of things come to mind, much more so than maybe in the average state in the US. Love this great travel poster from Braniff Airways. And of course, Texas and Dallas in particular, frequently used in different kind of pop culture media contexts. There was the great film Giant with Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, James Dean. And of course, if you're old enough, you probably remember the hit television show Dallas. So Dallas and Texas just kind of bring all of these different things to mind, which is interesting kind of in compare and contrast with maybe some other of the states throughout the US. And here's the license plate, the customized license plate from back in 2000. Texas is known, of course, as the Lone Star State. And just some real quick information about Texas. It's the second largest state by geographical area after Alaska, and it's the second largest state by population after California. And just kind of some things that I find interesting about Texas is you see all these Texas shaped products in stores and things. And, you know, I see these in other states as well, but I definitely see a lot more of them in Texas than any other place, maybe partially because Texas has a very distinct shape. And then also, too, it's just kind of part of the culture here. People are just really proud to be Texans or being in Texas. So here's an example. So I travel a lot, and you don't really see many other states that have, say, the waffle shaped waffle maker in hotels like you do in Texas. And then, of course, the Texas flag is one of the most well-known state flags in the US. And another thing that to me that was interesting when I first moved here is how often you see the Texas flag. You can go to another state and drive for miles and miles and miles and never see the state flag once. In fact, maybe you don't even know what their state flag looks like. Might be part of the reason why you don't see it or recognize it. But in Texas, you see the state flag all over the place. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's really great that people are proud of either where they're from or where they're living. So you see the flag in Texas, the state flag, more than any other state that I can think of. If you know of a state where they display the state flag frequently on a regular basis, you should let us know in the chat or the Zoom Q&A. Sandra wants to know where she can purchase the very well iced cookies. There's actually two people named Sandra that had kind of a similar comment. One said that's a very well iced cookie, and then the other person said, where can I buy those? You probably just have to Google them. So again, just a little bit more information about Dallas, Texas, before we start talking about the places we're going to be going on our trip. So did you know that one reason why Texas is the second most populous state in the US is because it has 4 of the 28 largest metro areas in in the US. So New York, where I'm currently at today, is the largest metro area in the US with a little bit over 20 million people, followed by Los Angeles, where I used to live, and then Chicago, and then Dallas-Fort Worth. So I think a lot of people are aware of the fact that Dallas-Fort Worth is a big area. I think quite a few people, though, don't realize how big it is and how high it ranks on the list of largest metro areas. So this isn't the city population, like say for New York or LA, it's the metro area population. And then just below Dallas, you have Houston, and then Washington, D.C., where I previously lived and still spend a lot of time there. In fact, a lot of you are joining us tonight from Washington, D.C., so welcome, no matter where you're connecting from. And then a little bit further down the list, you have Phoenix rounding out the top 10. Then you have San Antonio, which is number 24, and Austin, Texas, which is number 28. So a little bit of geography and trivia type information for you. And then Dallas-Fort Worth in particular, the population is really exploded. So look at the 1980 census. You can see the population for the metro area was just under 3 million people. And then you fast forward 40 years to 2020, and the population is 7.6 million. So it's really increased 2.5 times in 40 years. And then you can see the population growth by decade. So it's just really exploding. A lot of people are moving to Texas because the climate, the winters are warm. That was one reason why I came to Texas. And then also to the economy is typically doing very well. And just a lot of other interesting people are friendly, stuff like that. So that's the story with that. And Dallas is a very large Dallas-Fort Worth. I'll use the term Dallas to kind of convey Dallas-Fort Worth periodically. I don't want to leave out our friends in Fort Worth, but sometimes for this program, I'll use the term Dallas to be on the brief side. But the Dallas-Fort Worth area is really large geographically. It's really spread out, much more so, in my opinion, than many other cities in the US. And that's part of the reason why it's so large population-wise, but it's always been kind of spread out, even before all these millions of people either were born or moved here. So here's a beautiful shot downtown. This is one of the landmarks of Dallas. You may have seen this before. This is called Reunion Tower. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then here it is again over here. You frequently see it in like posters or photographs or postcards of cities. So there's the Reunion Tower. And Dallas is considered to have one of the most beautiful skylines in America. Here's another view. And another thing, if you're not familiar with this area, is there's Dallas and then there's Fort Worth, and there's quite a bit of space between those two places. So I printed out this Google Maps for you. Here's Dallas over here, and then here's Fort Worth over here. And you can see it's over 30 miles between these two places. So these aren't right next door to one another. Kind of like how, say, San Francisco and Oakland are right next door to each other. There's quite a bit of difference. And while that may not take long to travel between those two places, if there's no traffic, there frequently is traffic. And so this drive could take you quite a bit of time, depending on where you're locating at. Locals tend to call this area the Metroplex. So that's a term you might hear used periodically. This is the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport up here. And then some other places you may have heard of. Irving is over here. And let's see, you can look. So there's just a lot of different suburbs throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And here's where we're tentatively going to be going on our trip. So this itinerary is pretty firm. However, it's subject to change, of course, because we're still about a month away. So where we were planning on going is the following places. We were going to start off on Friday and see the Frida Kahlo immersive experience. Then we were going to go to the Dallas Museum of Art. Then on Saturday, we were going to go to Fort Worth and go to the Amon Carter Museum of American Art, the Kimball Art Museum, and then close at the Fort Worth Stockyards National Historic District. And then on Sunday, we were going to go to the John F. Kennedy Memorial, see the JFK 6-4 Museum at Daley Plaza, and then round out Sunday at the George W. Bush Presidential Library and Museum. And then on Monday, we were going to do a walk around the downtown Dallas Art District. So again, a little bit subject to change. I have to update the Eventbrite listing because some of these changes or some portions of the schedule are recent changes, and I haven't had a chance to update the Eventbrite schedule just yet, but I'll do that very soon. If you're not familiar with the Eventbrite posting, that's where we're going to keep all the details for the trip. If there's changes, I'll email them out as much as I can, but most of the information, pretty much 99% of the information you would need is going to be on this Eventbrite listing, and I just posted it in the chat in Zoom. And if you hold on for one moment, I'll post it on Facebook as well if you're watching this live there. Bear with me for one moment. While I take care of that. Oh, wait, let's see. That was not what I wanted. Hold on, let me try something again. The post didn't go through the first time. Let me try it one more time. So if you're watching on Zoom, if you're watching us live on Zoom, I posted the link to the trip in the Zoom chat. If you're watching us live on Facebook, I posted in the comments section on Facebook. Okay, and then when we do our group trips, they're set up what we call buffet style schedule. So you know a buffet, you go to it and you pick out the things that you want and you skip the things that you don't want. And that's how this trip is. You can pick any or all of the items that are on our itinerary. So here is the itinerary again. Usually for most days, we're just doing 2 things per day. So we're not we don't have a schedule that's like every single hour of the day from morning to late at evening. There's free time baked in so that you can rest, or if you want to go do something else, you can have time to do that and then make it back to whatever it is we're doing. So we have these 2 events are on Friday. These 3 are on Saturday. And then these 3 are on Sunday. This is actually kind of 2.5 events because these 2 are the same, the John F. Kennedy ones. And then on Monday, we're going down to here. So we have like 2 on average events per day. We give you free time to go do stuff on your own if you so choose. So let's do this. Let's go through and talk about the things we're going to be doing. And then you can decide if that's something that you want to join us at, or if you want to go do something on your own. So the first thing that we're going to go see on Friday afternoon is the Frida Kahlo immersive experience. So let's talk about this. This was a relatively new addition to the schedule or the itinerary. I wasn't planning on going here, but then I decided, oh, you know, this is a good opportunity for people to learn about Frida Kahlo. We do a number of programs about her over Zoom, and so if people are coming to Dallas, this is a good chance to learn about Frida Kahlo, her life, her love, and her art. And it's at this particular place. It's called the Lighthouse. This is a venue that hosted the Van Gogh immersive experience. And if you've been to the Van Gogh immersive experience, the Frida Kahlo one is very similar. Of course, the subject matter is a little bit different. And here's some little information about the Frida Kahlo exhibit. I'll let you read through that if you want to. If you're joining us live, this program is being recorded, so you don't necessarily have to take notes for some of the stuff that I'm going through. You can always just listen to the recording for this. I'll send out an email of the recording link for this, but I probably won't be able to do it until tomorrow. The cities that are currently having the Frida Kahlo immersive experience: Boston, Chicago, Dallas, where we're going to see it, Denver, Houston, Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, and Toronto. So you'll notice that New York City is missing, Washington, D.C. is missing, a few other places. So if you want to go check out Frida Kahlo Immersive Experience, you can come down to Dallas. And here's some images from the exhibit. So immersive experience is like this 3D visual cornucopia of imagery that pops up on these different screens with sound and light and all this other really cool stuff. And so they started out doing the Van Gogh one, then they've since added a Monet one. Now there's this one, and I've heard they're doing Klimt and several other artists. So this is like the latest thing, the latest phenomena, so to speak. And so just wanted to give you some images of what this looks like. Has a lot of quotes related to Frida Kahlo. I leave you my portrait so that you will have my presence all the days and nights that I'm away from you. And just some more images from the exhibit. So it's really different than going to a regular museum and just looking at paintings on the wall, so to speak. And so just wanted to show you some pictures, what to expect. So again, if you've been to the Van Gogh exhibit or immersive experience, or you've at least heard about it, this is a little bit similar. So I thought it was a good opportunity to check this out. So we're probably going to do this on Friday, early afternoon, but I have to track down some a little bit more details on this. I am my own muse. I am the subject I know best, the subject I want to know better, says Frida Kahlo. And there you have it. Okay, so then on Friday evening, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Dallas Museum of Art, which is really extraordinary art museum in downtown Dallas. Let's talk about some of the things that they have on display there. It's a really comprehensive art museum, comprehensive in terms of they have art from all the major periods and from all the different geographic locations throughout the world. And we're going to be visiting in the evening. So this is something that's really cool about quite a few of the museums in Dallas. They have evening hours, which not a lot of museums have evening hours throughout the country. Some of them do, most of them don't though. And so it's nice that the Dallas Museum of Art is open on Friday nights. And we'll probably meet here. So this is a beautiful Dale Chihuly installation right next to the cafe. So it has this beautiful extremely large window here with all these great Dale Chihuly glass sculptures that have been positioned on the window. So we'll probably meet here because this is right next to the main entryway to the museum. And then plus this is a really large space right here. So if you wanted to come in and get a snack or something before we started or use the restroom, we can do that right there. And then let's go through and look at some of the art that they have on display. So I thought what we would do for our trip is go look at two different sections of the museum and then give people an option to go see some of the rest of the museum if they so choose. So I thought what we would do is start out in the American art collection. I'm very familiar with American art. I've given a number of talks and lectures and things like that on American art for the past many years. And so let's look at some of the highlights from the American Art Collection, John Singleton Copley. This is one of the most famous paintings that they have in their collection. This is Frederick Edwin Church. And this painting has a really fascinating story. When it was sold many, many years ago, it was the largest price ever paid for an American artwork. And it's just really spectacular. So Frederick Church, one of the great American artists, and this is one of the highlights of the museum collection. So we're going to go see that. And they have Georgia O'Keeffe and a number of other great American artists. So I thought what we would do is do kind of a quick semi-guided tour of the American art collection. And then I thought what we would do after that is go check out the Impressionism collection. So Impressionism is another art genre that I'm very familiar with, and they have a great number of works here by artists like Claude Monet. And here's another Claude Monet. And so if you're visiting from out of town, it's really, when you go to these other art museums in different cities, really opportunity to go see different artworks that you might not normally be able to see on your own, at least not live in person. Here's a great painting by Degas, Renoir, Van Gogh, and another Van Gogh. So again, I thought we'd start out in the American art collection, spend a little bit of time going through there, then we'll go through the Impressionism collection, and then we'll continue on from there. Now, the museum does have a really extraordinary African art collection. I'm familiar with African art, but I'm not an expert on it. So we're not going to be going there on our group visit just because I'm not an expert on it. I'm much more familiar with American art and Impressionism. And believe me, once we get done with those two, we will have been kind of walking a great distance and seeing a lot of art. So if you are interested in African art, I really recommend visiting this section of the museum. They have a fabulous collection, but we won't be going through it as an official, like, scheduled event just because I'm not as familiar with African art as I am some others. And then they also have a really incredible Asian art collection. And again, kind of similar to African art, I do know a fair amount about Asian art, but not as much as the other two categories we discussed. But if you like Asian art, you really want to check this out. The way our schedule is set up, you can always visit the museum a little bit early before our scheduled events that we're having and see some of these things. Or the way it's going to be set up is the museum will still be open once we're done, and you'll have time afterwards, if you so choose, to check out some of these other things. Now, they're having an exhibit that's going to be opening up in a few days that is really unique. I forgot to mention that when you visit the Dallas Museum of Art, it's free for the general admission. The Frida Kahlo immersive experience, that costs money. I think it's not cheap. I think the tickets are like $40, if not mistaken. Just as a FYI. The Dallas Museum of Art is free always, so that's really a great deal. How many places can you go and see Monet and Van Gogh and Frederick Church and John Singleton Copley and George O'Keeffe for free? Well, you can in Dallas. Now, they do have this special exhibit taking place. It's opening up in a few days, and it looks like it's really going to be a good one. It was previously in Paris, and it got rave reviews there. It's Cartier and Islamic art in search of modernity. So I'm not going to read that whole entire description, but suffice to say, the exhibit has to do how Cartier was really intrigued by Islamic art and really ends up influencing some of the things he did in terms of his jewelry design. So this is a special exhibit. If you want to go to this, it's not going to be part of our like official scheduled visit, but again, you can always go to the museum before we're scheduled to arrive or stick around after we're done and go check this out. It's a kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity probably to see this exhibit. And I think the tickets for this are going to be like $20 or $25. So if you want to go to the museum for free, or if you want to go to the museum, just the regular museum part is free. But if you want to go to the special exhibit, you have to pay extra. I'm not sure if I'm going to see this myself. I'll just have to see how it goes. I grew up in Dearborn, Michigan, which is a suburb of Detroit. They have a very large Islamic population there. And so I'm a little bit familiar with this art, and it's really fascinating. A lot of great comparisons and contrasts with, say, European and American art. And this greatly influenced Cartier, and so the exhibit focuses on that. So I've not seen this exhibit because it obviously hasn't opened up yet in Dallas, and I have not made it to Paris, but when I saw reviews of it, it was very well received in Paris. So FYI on that. So that looks very interesting. So something for you to keep in mind. All right, so that's going to be Friday. And then on Saturday, we're going to go to Fort Worth and check things out there. I was initially going to go to Fort Worth on Sunday, but I tweaked the schedule a little bit. So now we're going to go there on Saturday. And mentions said before, Fort Worth and Dallas are a little bit spread out. So you probably are going to either need to get a car or get an Uber or a Lyft or something like that. On these types of trips, we don't arrange the transportation or the accommodations or anything like that. You have to do that yourself. But what we'll do is we'll start out Saturday morning at the Amon Carter Museum of American Art, which has a great collection as well. And this is in Fort Worth. This museum is also free. Whenever we do our programs, I try and come up with as many free activities as possible. And so this museum is free. The museum primarily throughout its history is known for really outstanding collection of Western art, in particular works by Frederick Remington. And so if you like him, you'll really enjoy this museum. This is the inside, give you a sense of what that looks like. And so just to give you kind of some highlights of the collection, again, really outstanding group of works by Frederick Remington, one of the great American artists, and really kind of coincides with Fort Worth being known as kind of like a Western city and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes when you go to museums in America, you don't see Frederick Remington a lot, or you don't get a chance, or if you do, if you go to a museum and they do have some of his work, it's maybe just like one or two sometimes. But when you come here, they have this really incredible collection of his artwork. So it's really a great opportunity to see his work up close and in person. And so just some examples of that. Let's see. Patty asked what was the title of the church painting at the Dallas Museum. It's the Icebergs. And then Sandra said that was the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, Wallace Simpson. Let me put that. Oh, and then here's another interesting thing about screensavers. So hold on, let me post these comments in the chat in Zoom. Okay, some more works by Frederick Remington, and then the great sculpture here. And then they have a number of other artists kind of from the Western American genre, so to speak, including Charles M. Russell. Another work by Russell. Here's a beautiful painting by Thomas Moran. And then in the past many years, the collection has really expanded to get beyond Western American art. It still is entirely American art, but they have expanded beyond kind of like the Western theme or motif. So some other highlights include Winslow Homer, William Merritt Chase. And to go back to this painting, I like going to museums like this. You know, it's great to go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York and the Washington, D.C.'s National Gallery of Art and the Art Institute of Chicago. But it's nice to go sometimes to other museums and see what works they have. So there's a lot of well-known Homer paintings by Winslow Homer. But it's nice to go to another museum and see what other works he did. And so an opportunity to do that when you visit Fort Worth or Dallas or various other places. Mary Cassatt, John Singer Sargent. And so really nice that they've expanded the collection beyond just the Western artist. Kind of the same thing here. As the Dallas Museum, we're going to show up probably right when they open the doors at 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. And our official visit will probably be like an hour and a half long or so. But if you want to stay over and check things out in a little more detail, you are free to do so. And then just down the street from the Amon Carter Museum is the Kimball Art Museum, also in Fort Worth. Their collection is focused on European art. So we'll start off with the American art at the Amon Carter Museum, then we'll switch gears and go to the Kimball Art Museum. If you walk a lot, you probably could just walk from one museum to the other. If you need a break from walking or standing up, you probably can just drive your car from one part to another. You have to remember too, it's also going to be Memorial Day weekend down in Dallas. It's going to be kind of hot. So I think the two museums are only like a half a mile apart, which, you know, is not all that far during normal circumstances. But if you're going to be on your feet a lot, standing and walking during the trip, you might want to kind of conserve your energy and stay a little bit cool in the air conditioning of your car by driving. The Kimball Art Museum has a really beautiful architectural design. So that's one of the kind of the highlights of this museum. It's not just your basic square box, so to speak. So I just wanted to show you some images of the architecture itself. So if you like architecture, like modern architecture, you'll probably enjoy just looking at the building itself. This museum also has evening hours periodically. So if you're going to be visiting Dallas-Fort Worth on your own at some point in time, you might be able to do that. And then it's also known for a large amount of natural light. That's one of the things that really makes it cool. I think half the lighting is natural in the museum if you were to add it all up. And so that's really different because a lot of museums don't have a lot of natural lighting. So this one does. And again, it focuses on European art. Here's a painting by Michelangelo. Michelangelo, more known for being a sculptor in certain instances, although he did make a great number of paintings, of course. So you can kind of compare and contrast this with other works of his that you might be familiar with. And then here's a great painting by Caravaggio. So in Washington, D.C., where a lot of our folks are joining us from, one of my favorite art museums is the National Gallery of Art. It has a really fabulous collection, but they don't have any Caravaggio paintings. So if you like his artwork and you're in DC, you have to kind of go somewhere else to see him in person. So there's a painting by him. And so again, just kind of some of the other highlights they have on display, El Greco. I didn't put the names of the paintings or the dates because I feel like we can go look at those when we're in person. And plus, I didn't want to get that much detailed for this particular presentation. I really just kind of wanted you to see some of the highlights that you can visit. I was thinking at some point in time, if you're not joining us in Dallas, I was thinking at some point in time, I'll see if I could do live stream tours of these museums like I have done for some of the other ones, but I would have to it would take some time to put that together. Here's a great Impressionist painting. And then here's a well-known painting by Cezanne. If you saw our Modigliani film program we had a few months ago, we talked about the fact that he's known as being a painter, but he also did some sculptures. And so this is actually a rare sculpture by Modigliani. There's Miro. So again, great collection of European art. They have quite a few other things as well, but the European art's the highlights. And then this is the special exhibit that they're having. It's called The Language of Beauty in African Art. And it's basically how beauty is portrayed in African art. African art's really fascinating. A lot of great comparisons or similarities and contrasts with, say, European or American art. And this exhibit opened a few days ago, and it's running through July 31st. And here's some examples of some of the works they have there. So as long as we're visiting, checking out the European art, might as well take a look at that. And so this will be Saturday afternoon, we'll probably be visiting here. They also have a nice cafe at the Kimball Art Museum. So if we need to take a break for lunch in between the Amon Carter American Art Museum and this museum, we might be able to do it easily at the cafe at the Kimball Art Museum, which is pretty good. And then I was thinking afterwards, after the two art museums, if you're still able to kind of walk around a little bit and check some stuff out, I thought, you know, as long as we're over in Fort Worth, we might as well go check out the Stockyards. So this is a really interesting place. And here it is, the Fort Worth Stockyards. And it's basically as the name describes. So let's talk about this site. The Fort Worth Stockyards is a historic district that is located in Fort Worth, Texas, north of the Central Business District. The 98-acre portion encompassing much of the district was listed on the National Register of Historic Places as Fort Worth Stockyards Historic District 1976. It holds a former livestock market which operated under various owners from 1866. So imagine back in the day, ranchers bringing their livestock here to sell, and then the animals or the products from animals shipped to points elsewhere in the United States, places like Chicago and things like that. Here's a vintage image of it. And you can still see some of these pens with the animals in them, which is really interesting. And then periodically they do these cattle drives through the town. So that's what's taking place here. And if you've never seen these animals up close in person, they're really magnificent. So really interesting to see them up close in person. Julie asks, can you pet them? I don't believe you can, Julie. So, sorry about that. And so again, periodically they have these cattle drives through town. So something for you to keep looking. And of course, these are called longhorns. Why are they called longhorns? Well, because the horns are long, of course. And then this is a shopping and dining section of the Stockyards, located in the heart of the Fort Worth Stockyards. Stockyards Station exemplifies Texas by providing an exciting blend of old and new with historic walking tours and over 20 unique shops. Whether it's barbecue, beef jerky, or the perfect pair of boots, you'll have plenty of options to choose from. Dine, discover, and delight in the offerings at the Fort Worth Stockyards. So if you're looking for some kind of Western wear, like hats and boots and belts and all that kind of stuff, this is the place you can go get that from. And, you know, sometimes when you go to a area of the world that has stuff like this, it's mostly tourists. But in my opinion, here, it's kind of a mix of locals and tourists. It's not entirely, it's not, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not necessarily a tourist trap, although if you're more of an expert on Fort Worth than I am, you can feel free to let us know what you think in the chat or the Q&A or the comments. And then there's also a lot of great places to eat. So I was thinking that this might be a good place that we could go walk around after we visit the museums and kind of check things out. It's a very historic area and there's quite a few places to eat. So we can go check that out. Just as a FYI though, I'm trying to move in the direction of becoming a vegetarian. So I'm not 100% of the way there yet, but going in that direction. But I think maybe this will be, I try and only eat 2 meals a week that have meat in them. The other night, if you figure a person eats 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, that's 21 meals. I try now to only eat 2 meals a week that have meat in them. So I'm going to try and save one of my allotments for the Stockyards. And then there's some more pictures of that. So it's kind of open in the day and then sometimes into the evening. So interesting place to check out. Okay, so that's Saturday. And then on Sunday, what I thought we would do is go check out the John F. Kennedy Memorial and the 6th floor museum at Daley Plaza. So let's talk about that. John F. Kennedy, accompanied by his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy, famously went to Dallas, Texas, tragically in November of 1963. And this is one of the real turning points in American history because once John F. Kennedy was killed, all kind of leads to a domino effect of all these other things happening. And interestingly enough, Lyndon Johnson, who took over for Kennedy, was from Texas himself. So we're going to go to this place, the 6th floor museum at Daley Plaza. So what I thought I would do for this particular day is the museum opens at 10 a.m. But what I thought we would do is maybe walk around a little bit beforehand and kind of get the lay of the land, so to speak. A lot of people just come down here and they walk right through the front door and look at the exhibits, and that's fine. But I think you get more out of the exhibits if you kind of walk around this area first and kind of see how things physically took place and then go inside the museum. So that's what I recommend doing. So that's what we'll go check out. And of course, President Kennedy was traveling in the motorcade that was going through downtown Dallas when the shots rang out. And you no doubt have seen this famous video footage that was taken of that tragedy. And it's really kind of amazing to go see this place in person. So, you know, I really like history and traveling and stuff like that. And yeah, it's great to read books and watch videos or listen to these Zoom programs or see movies. But whether you're talking about visiting Dallas or Gettysburg or some other place like that, Ford's Theater, there's nothing like going to the actual site and seeing things unfold in person. Like another good example is the Watergate break-in. We lead tours down there in Washington, D.C. And, you know, you can watch all the President's Men and read all these books, but gosh, when you actually go down to D.C. and see how the burglary unfolded, it really kind of has a big impact. And same thing coming here, this is the window that Oswald was looking out from. And then here's part of the home video footage. And so you can stand in this very spot, which is really kind of eerie. This street is still open now. People still drive on the street. So it's kind of, I feel like the word surreal is overused, but it's kind of surreal to be standing on this spot and watching these cars driving right by where President Kennedy was shot at. It's just very kind of unusual. And they have X's in the street to mark where he was struck. So that's also kind of pretty unusual or interesting. And then not too far away, this is a memorial to President Kennedy. This is also worthwhile seeing. You might want to, after you visit the museum, go see these places outside again. That's what most people do. I don't know what the percentage is, but if I had to guess, most people go inside the museum, and then when they're done, then they go outside and look at the other stuff. I think it's better to actually go see the stuff outside first and then go to the museum. And then if you want, afterwards, you can go back and visit these places again. So that's why we're going to do it that way. This is a memorial to President Kennedy. And then you go inside and they have all these exhibits that talk about not only assassination, but President Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy and their administration. And again, this is the actual book depository. So when you come here, you really get a great understanding of what actually took place. Here's the window. Here's where the car took place. Here's the infamous grassy knoll. Here's where the video was taken from right here. They have a model mock-up of this part of the city. So again, really clear to see what happens when you're looking at something like this. Lee Harvey Oswald actually ordered the gun that he shot President Kennedy with from an advertisement he saw in a magazine. And then this is not the exact video recorder that was used, but it's the same exact kind. And so interesting to look. I mean, look how small this is. It's really pretty tiny. One of the most famous home movies in history. And talks about the investigation. Here's all the evidence. So if you're a if you're a John F. Kennedy assassination conspiracy theorist type person, you can check that out. And then if you joined us for our Ford's Theater program we had a couple weeks ago, one of the things that I mentioned in that program was the fact that I liked how Ford's Theater, they didn't just talk about the assassination of President Lincoln, they also spent quite a bit of time going through the legacy of Abraham Lincoln. And they do kind of something similar here. So you do go here and learn a lot about the assassination, all the different aspects of it, but it's not just a museum about the assassination. It's also about President Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy and their legacy. And so I like that they added that aspect of it. So it's not totally 100% depressing, although it is very sad, as you can imagine, going here. Just really has a lot of interesting historical items related to the Kennedys. And so that's pretty worthwhile. Now, a while back in November, we actually had a live stream program like this where we went through the Kennedy assassination. If you have not seen that before, or if I should say, if you're not familiar with the Kennedy assassination, you can check out this YouTube program that we previously did. Hold on one second. I'll post the link in the chat. This would basically be helpful if you're going down to Dallas with us and going to the museum and kind of want like a quick overview of the assassination before we get there. Hold on one second. Let me post this. I'll post the link for it in the comments in Facebook if you're watching us live, or also in the chat in Zoom if you're watching us live there. And again, it's on our YouTube channel, Washington, D.C. History and Culture. It was a program that we did last November. It talked all about why did the Kennedys go to Dallas? What were they doing before the assassination? What took place afterwards, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I posted the link for that in the comment section on Facebook or the chat in Zoom if you're watching us live. You can go check that out at your leisure. Okay, so one challenge with talking about history is gosh, as a country, we just become so divided, and there's so much kind of partisan bickering back and forth. It's really frustrating to me personally, to be quite honest with you. Politically independent, and so at the Kennedy Museum, he was a Democrat, and we're also going to be visiting the George W. Bush Presidential Museum, and he was a Republican. And myself, I'm able to kind of skip over that partisan political stuff. Hopefully you can too, during our trip, just because I don't know, there's just so much. We post stuff on our Facebook page that has nothing to do with politics, and people are always adding in kind of politically motivated comments, which is really frustrating. So we're going to be going to the George W. Bush Presidential Center, and some people probably say, "Oh, I don't want to go there or any other presidential museum if it's not for the political party that you support," which is really unfortunate. So again, hopefully we can kind of put all that aside during our trip and not have those kind of discussions or issues. But this is a museum I really like a lot. I actually really like George W. Bush. I pretty much like all the presidents for the most part, although some I like more than others, you can imagine. And it's a museum. If you've not been to a presidential museum before, really recommend going to see these. They're always really great, and an excellent way to learn about history. And it's not just President George W. Bush. You also get to learn about First Lady Laura Bush. And this is, I'll let you read that if you want to. This is basically just some information that talks about the presidential museum, say, system, so to speak. They started out, or they began with President Herbert Hoover. Franklin Roosevelt was actually the first president to have kind of a modern type of setup like this. But then later on, Herbert Hoover got into the act, and it goes up through George W. Bush, the one that we're looking at in Dallas. And here were all the official presidential museums. Now, there's quite a few other museums throughout the US that are related to different presidents, whether it's, I don't know, Abraham Lincoln or whoever. These are the kind of official presidential museums. So you can see you have Reagan, Nixon. There's 3 of them in Texas: Lyndon Johnson, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and of course Eisenhower, Clinton, Carter, Harry Truman, Hoover, Gerald Ford, Franklin Roosevelt, and John F. Kennedy. The Barack Obama Museum is currently under construction in Chicago. So that one will be opening up at some point in time in the future. And if you're wondering, Robert, how many of these 13 presidential museums have you been to? I've been to 12. I only have one to go, and quite a few of them I've been to more than once, including the George W. Bush Museum. I haven't made it to the Franklin Roosevelt Museum, unfortunately, but we'll be doing that, so hopefully at some point in time in the future. And this is some information on the George W. Bush. Oh, someone asked, so President Trump has not really indicated what he's going to be doing with his presidential museum. I would imagine it would be in Florida, since that's where he's based at, but he may be kind of seeing what his political future has in store. So that hasn't been officially decided yet, at least not publicly announced. This is the information related to George W. Bush. Presidential Center opened in April of 2013. It's on the campus of Southern Methodist University. So this is not in downtown Dallas. This is a little ways from some of the other places that we're going to be visiting. And I thought we would do this on Sunday as well. So we'll be going to the Kennedy Museum and then also this one. I've been here before, but I was actually just here about a month ago to kind of check things out. And one of the things that's really fascinating about these presidential museums, one of many things, is that how the presidents kind of all come together in their kind of like little informal club after they leave office. And it's a great kind of bipartisan support here. So here's the opening of the museum. You can see the presidents, Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush, and Jimmy Carter. And here they are inside. And so I don't know, just to give you my opinion and go on a soapbox, I kind of feel like we're unfortunately moving away from being a bipartisan society. We're getting very polarized, unfortunately. So hopefully places like this can work to kind of keep those. And this, I don't know if you saw this, was a photo that went viral a while back. This was when Bill Clinton visited. They have these 2 big sculptures of George W. Bush and his father, and the first ladies there as well. So kind of a similar thing, kind of putting aside the differences that maybe they had politically or with their husbands. And so that's Michelle Obama, Laura Bush, Hillary Clinton, Barbara Bush, and Rosalind Carter. A lot of the museum centers around 9/11, of course, which was really the central act of the Bush administration. And, even if you don't like the president that's at the Presidential Museum you're visiting, you should still go, because regardless of your political feelings, these museums are really great to go to, just kind of relive or learn about the era that the person was president, whether it's George W. Bush or Jimmy Carter or Dwight D. Eisenhower, Harry Truman, etc. So of course, 9/11 was one of the big events. And for me personally, going back here, it just really kind of triggers a lot of memories of 9/11, and things that both I was familiar with and some things that I had forgotten, and even some things that I didn't know about. This, of course, is a piece of steel from the Trade Center. And now, 9/11 is such an ingrained part of our history that we know how this story plays out. And to me, the most fascinating part of this exhibit is kind of seeing if you are able to remember back when 9/11 first happened, just kind of all the fear and anxiety and uncertainty as far as what was going to happen. And so it was really interesting when the exhibit kind of goes to the timeline. I distinctly remember there was a poll right after 9/11, and they asked Americans how likely it was that there'd be another major terrorist attack on American soil. And I don't remember the exact percentage, but it was very high. Like the majority of the people thought, oh yeah, there probably will be more big attacks like this that will kill hundreds or even thousands of people. But fortunately, for the leadership of President Bush and other people that have followed in the Oval Office and our military and things like that, there have not been any large scale attacks like this, thank God, knock on wood. And then, have you ever been inside the Oval Office in the White House? I have, fortunately, and very moving experience to go see it in person in Washington, D.C., but it's very hard to get into the Oval Office. They don't let tourists in the Oval Office in Washington, D.C. You have to have some kind of official business reason to be there. I was fortunate to get in once for just a few minutes. And so the next best thing is going to see the Oval Office that they've recreated at the Bush Museum. Some of the other presidential museums have these as well. Like, for instance, I was just at the Lyndon Johnson Presidential Museum in Austin, Texas. They also have a recreation of the Oval Office, but you can actually walk through here. So now you kind of have to behave yourself. You don't want to plop down on the couch and put your feet up on the desk or do anything crazy behind the president's desk. But this is the exact copy of the Oval Office the way it was when President Bush was in the White House. They've recreated the desk and the furniture and the rug and the paintings and all the other artwork and stuff. And there's usually a person here that will describe these different things and why President Bush chose them or what kind of meaning they had. And so again, it's not many people have been inside the Oval Office in the White House, but this is like the next best thing. So this is almost worth the price of admission just to go in here and check this out. So just really, really amazing. And if you think about all the historic events and decisions that took place in the Oval Office throughout history, just really incredible. And then, of course, the large sections of the museum have to do with different things that not only President Bush was involved in, but also Laura Bush. Well, for instance, like the No Child Left Behind. I don't have a picture of it, but right over here to the right, it talks about Laura Bush's role or her career as a teacher and a librarian, and a lot of the different things that she was involved in terms of literacy. If we had more time, I'd go through and explain all that stuff, but this is really kind of the highlights. Again, I was thinking maybe at some point in time I could do like a highlights of the museum for a Zoom, but I'm not sure when I'll have time to put that together. Another kind of interesting aspect of the White House exhibit at the Bush Museum is the entertaining. Like they have all these state dinners and events at the White House, and what would those be like to attend? So here's an example. Check out this menu. Maryland she crab soup. This was for the Prime Minister of Japan when he was visiting in June of 2006. And then check that out. Do you ever wonder what a place setting would be like at the White House? Well, here you go. So really beautiful, and did a great job setting that up. Okay, so that would be on Sunday. And then on Monday, Memorial Day, a lot of things will be closed. And so I thought what we could do is walk around what's known as the downtown Dallas Art District and check out things there. Has a lot of public art. Oh, Gene wanted to remind folks, thanks, Gene, that when you're at the Bush Museum, you can sit at the desk if you want and get your picture taken. Actually, let me go back to that. So thanks, Gene. Sometimes I forget to say stuff. So yeah, you can actually sit at the desk and get your picture taken. That's like a thing that people like to do. But again, you just have to behave yourself and be on good behavior. I'm assuming that if you're watching this program and visiting the museum, you're going to be an adult and you're not going to act like a 8-year-old or something crazy. But thanks, Gene. I appreciate that. So then anyway, the next day on Monday, which is Memorial Day, a lot of things are going to be closed, of course, because of the holiday. But I thought we could do is kind of walk around and check out some of the public art that they have on display at the downtown Dallas Art District. And so they kind of have this set up for people to take selfies or pictures or anything. You've probably heard Dallas referred to as the Big D, not to be confused with my hometown Detroit. And so just kind of a lot of interesting things to go check out. Now it's going to be a little bit warm Memorial Day weekend in Dallas. So I thought we would do this kind of in the late morning before it gets too hot. And there's places where people sit out and have picnics. They usually have at various times like outdoor musical performances and things like that in these different areas. We're a little ways away from Memorial Day weekend, so we'll have to go keep an eye on the schedule and see if there's anything going to be taking place noteworthy. This is a really cool sculpture of Rosa Parks. And here's one of the famous sculptures, the Big Eye. Hold on, let me post some of these comments in the chat. Hold on one second. Oh, this is nice. People that are familiar with Dallas are posting their opinions on things. So I'll post those in the chat. Thank you very much. So this is one more noteworthy sculptures, this Big Eye. There it is. So might want to get your picture taken with that. This is an outdoor sculpture garden. You have to pay to go to this, but it might be worthwhile to go check out if you like outdoor public sculpture. And then this is kind of one of the landmarks of Dallas is this Pegasus. You might recognize that from back in the day. Dallas, of course, home to a lot of oil companies. And there it is at night, the neon. And then another view. So you'll see this kind of like one of the symbols of the city that you see frequently. And then, as I mentioned before, another symbol of the city is the Reunion Tower. So you can actually go up to the top of here and it has a great view. I haven't officially scheduled that for our group, but if that's something you're interested, we're going to be right in that general vicinity on different occasions. So you'll probably have an opportunity to go check that out if you want to. It has great views of the city. You can see this little tiny thing down here is a car. And then here's another one. So just to give you kind of a sense of how high up you are when you're there. And then here it is here. And then again, this great view of the city. So we're not officially scheduled to go there like as a group at this point in time. But like I said before, you just, during this program, you have opportunities to kind of go off and do things on your own. You might recognize this building right here. This is the building that Oswald shot Kennedy from. And so it has a great view of that. President Kennedy's motorcade basically came down this way, drove down the street here, and then made a left turn here. And then this is where Oswald shot him. And then the car sped up to Parkland Hospital. Okay, let's do this. I thought we'd talk about maybe some other kind of just miscellaneous things, either related to Dallas in general or our trip specifically. So let's go through a handful of miscellaneous things. Again, here's the itinerary as it stands now, a month before our trip. So Friday, we'll go to the Frida Kahlo immersive experience in the Dallas Museum of Art. Saturday, we'll go to the Amon Carter Museum of American Art, the Kimball Art Museum, and the Fort Worth Stockyards National Historic District. Sunday, we'll go to the JFK Memorial, the 6th floor museum, and the George W. Bush Presidential Library Museum. And then on Monday, Memorial Day, we'll go check out the downtown Dallas Art District. As I mentioned before, this is a buffet style schedule. What that means is if you want to skip some of the items on our trip, you're free to do so. If you want to come to all of them, that's fine. It just really entirely up to you. It's basically, these are things I wanted to go explore. And so if you want to come along, you are free to do so. If you're in downtown Dallas, in my opinion, Dallas does not have as great a public transportation system as some other cities, like say New York or Washington, D.C. They are working in that direction, though, and something that they've had for quite a while is this free bus called the D-Link. So if you are kind of staying downtown or you're trying to navigate downtown, you'd want to research this so you can figure out where it picks people up at and where it goes to. But this might be a good option for you if you need to travel around the D-Link. And then you can't talk about a trip without discussing food, and probably the one of the most well-known food forms in Texas is, of course, barbecue. So let's talk about this, because Texas barbecue is a little bit different than the way it is in the rest of the world. So I'm originally from Detroit, and when you go to a barbecue restaurant in Detroit, what you do is you walk through the front door, a waiter or waitress, they seat you down at a seat, you're given a menu, you place your order with a waiter or waitress, they go take your order to the kitchen and they bring your food out. It's Texas style barbecue. The process of how you order it's a little bit different. What you do is you walk up to the place where the menu is, and you basically pick out what you want to eat. So for instance, you'd walk up here and you look at all this stuff and you just basically decide what you want. Like, okay, I want some pork ribs, and I want some beef brisket, and I want, I don't know, some shrimp poppers or whatever. And then you basically read that or state that to the person who's working there, and they pull it fresh right off the grill for you. So here's a couple examples. This is actually one of my favorite barbecue restaurants in Texas. It's in the Dallas area. There's a few different locations called the Hard 8 Barbecue. So I've eaten here a number of times. It's always great food. So if you're looking for a place to check out, you might want to do that, Hard 8 Barbecue. And so again, you go ahead and pick out what you want. Notice this food is by the pound. So if you just kind of want a sample, you might want to tell them like, oh, I just want like a quarter pound. This is a fun thing to do with other people, because like, for instance, if you go with, I don't know, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 other people, you can, one person can order the ribs and somebody else can order the brisket and someone else can get the turkey and somebody else can get sausage or whatever. And then you can kind of trade amongst yourselves. And again, this place is called the Hard 8 Pit Barbecue, which again is going to be a challenge because I'm trying to eat more vegetarian these days, but we'll see what I can do. And then here's just a sample of the food. My personal favorites at barbecue, Texas style barbecue restaurants, and Texas style refers not only to that kind of ordering process, but just also to like the meats and the sides and how they prepare it and all that kind of stuff. My personal favorites are the chicken, the turkey, and the sausage, although God, they're all pretty much all good. But anyway, that's that. And then, of course, Tex-Mex is a familiar term, and probably going to be eating some Tex-Mex food or maybe Mexican food as well. And of course, a lot of great options for that as well. So when you're down in Dallas, you can check out those 2 food genres, among others. And Dallas is also known as being a big fashion place and a big shopping place. Dallas is the headquarters of Neiman Marcus. So you probably be familiar with them. You can go to their flagship store downtown. There's also, as you can imagine, because it's such a big city, there's all kinds of different shopping malls and things like that throughout the area. This is probably the most well-known shopping mall. It's called the Galleria, and it has this big ice rink inside of it. So if you ever wanted to ice skate on Memorial Day weekend, here's your big chance. Now, of course, it's indoors, but it is kind of cool to come here and see all this. This is a really big mall. There's quite a few other places to go shopping. You could just Google different things if you want to research that more. We're not going to be going here officially on our group, but of course, as I mentioned, there's a lot of free time in our schedule, so you can go check out stuff. And then back to Fort Worth, we're not actually visiting this particular site, but if you're a history buff, you might want to go check it out. So President Kennedy actually gave his last speech in Fort Worth outside of the hotel that him and Jackie were staying in the morning that he was killed. And there's a memorial there now. So this is not part of our official itinerary, just because I couldn't quite squeeze it into the mix, so to speak, but it's a place called the Hotel Texas. And if you are going out to Fort Worth, like to visit the art museums with us or the Stockyards, you probably best bet would be to go see this the morning of the art museum visits, which is going to be on Saturday. Because the reason being is it'd probably better to go here in the morning than in the evening, just because by the end of the day, you're probably going to be too tired to go over here. But anyway, this is the hotel where John F. Kennedy and Jackie spent their last night together, because he was killed the next morning, and he gave this speech out in front of the hotel. Pretty brief speech, but his last speech nonetheless. And then if you go there, they have this nice memorial to President Kennedy. So if you're a history buff or want to learn more about President Kennedy or that kind of stuff, you might want to check that out. And then Dallas is famously home to the Cowboys. So it's not going to be football season during our visit, so you won't be able to see them play, which may or may not be a thing that you care about, because the Cowboys are a team that probably the most popular football team in America, and probably also at the same time the most hated football team in America. But their stadium is really impressive, and even if the Cowboys aren't playing, you can actually go check out the stadium. It's kind of pricey. I think it's like $30. Maybe that was a few years ago. Maybe the price has gone up since then. But it's kind of cool. You can actually walk around on the field. So I'm not going to be doing this with our group because I've already done this before. But again, kind of amazing just to go walk around and check things out. This is me from a few years ago. So if that's something that interests you, you can go check that out. It's in Arlington. Arlington is a suburb of both Dallas and Fort Worth, kind of in between the two cities. And then I've not been to this site. I've always wanted to go, but I've heard great things about it. This is the Dallas Holocaust Museum. So I've not been here, but I keep hearing people telling me that this is a great museum, one of the best in the country. So if you're interested in Holocaust history, you might want to go check that out. I was hoping to go here as well, but just ran out of time. So when we organize our second Dallas trip, which there will be a second one. So for those of you that can't join us on this first one, or live in Dallas and want to go do this stuff with us because you're local, we'll schedule another trip there at some point in time in the future, and hopefully we can go there. Another great thing that people like to do is go to the Texas State Fair. Now, this is also something that you can't do on a Memorial Day weekend trip because it's not taking place. This is something that happens in the fall. But if you're ever in Texas, in the Dallas area in the fall, you might want to go check out the Texas State Fair. And you can say hello to Big Tex. It's pictured there. And then this was something I was hoping to do, but again, just ran out of time. So Dallas was the home of Bonnie and Clyde. And we actually had a Bonnie and Clyde live stream program, I think it was about a year ago, with our friend Liz. So what I was thinking about doing was I was trying to see if I could schedule like a semi self-guided driving tour where we'd go see some of these sites around Dallas that are associated with Bonnie and Clyde. But I just We just don't have the time. So maybe that's something that we can do at some point in time in the future. If you're interested in kind of their history or crime or stuff like that, there's different websites you can Google that basically will list out the sites, like the homes that they lived in, and other places like that. So Bonnie and Clyde were from Dallas. And here's kind of a list of some things that you might want to go see. This is not an all-inclusive list, of course, but just some other things in Dallas that we're not officially seeing, but you might be interested in going to. Dallas Arboretum and Botanical Gardens. You talked about the Cowboys and AT&T Stadium. We also talked about the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. The Dallas World Aquarium is highly regarded, as is the Dallas Zoo, the Fort Worth Botanical Garden, the Fort Worth Zoo, the Frontiers of Flight Museum. American Airlines is based in Dallas. We talked about Neiman Marcus. The Perot Museum, remember Ross Perot? He was from Dallas. So they have the Perot Museum of Nature and Science. We talked a little bit about the Reunion Tower. Six Flags over Texas is the big amusement park. Texas Rangers is the baseball team. There's the Texas State Fair, and then the Bonnie and Clyde sites. At some point in time, we were going to organize a trip like this to Austin. I was thinking about trying to do this in June, but that's just we can't do that. It's just going to be too much work to do this the week after Dallas. So at some point in time, we'll have a trip like this, except we'll go to Austin, Texas, which is the capital of Texas. So if you want to go check that out with us at some point in time, you can. And then I also thought we would go to San Antonio, another great city. You can go see the Riverwalk and the Alamo and stuff like that. So we'll do that at some point in time. Now, someone's probably going to be wondering, well, what about Houston? I would like to go to Houston too, but to be honest with you, I'm not as familiar with Houston as I am Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio. So we'll probably go there at some point in time. It's just not going to be like in the next few weeks or months, but maybe later. And then let's do this. If you're going on a trip, let's go through like some logistical stuff just to make sure everyone's on the same page. The one big recommendation I have, if you're coming on our trip, is to read the event description, because what happens is people keep sending me emails and text messages and calling me, and 90% of the time that someone contacts me with a question, it's something that's already detailed in the event description. So it would really be a big help if people could read that. Now, if there's any schedule changes or any updates or anything like that, I'll put it in the event description on Eventbrite. For a program like this, you're welcome to RSVP, even if you're not sure if you're going to attend. That's fine. Just as a FYI, myself, I'm vaccinated and boosted, and I'm a big supporter of wearing masks whenever possible. We talked about this as a buffet style trip. You can come and go whenever you want. As far as the trip dates go, same thing. If you want to show up the days we're there and leave when we're done, that's fine. If you want to show up a day or two early, of course, that's fine. If you want to stay over a day or two early, that's fine. Heck, if you want to pack up all your stuff and move to Dallas and you get there the weekend that we're there, that's fine too. Whatever you want to do. Again, I mentioned the itinerary has some open times. Let's see, everyone is welcome to attend, including locals, which there actually will be quite a few local people joining us. My two cousins live in Dallas, and some other friends might be joining us. So it's not just going to be strictly people from out of town visiting, although quite a few people will. But it's always kind of fun when you have a trip like this, and there's a mix of people that are from out of town and people that are local, and you can kind of compare notes to the other. And then we're not collecting any fees from anybody participate in this program. The museum, some of them charge admission, but we're not collecting any money from any of you for participating in this program. If you do want to make some kind of gratuity or donation for this trip or anything else we do, that's fine. You're more than welcome to. It basically just goes to support the free online and in-person nonprofit community programs that we do. Let's see, as I mentioned, some of the attractions we're seeing charge admission. Most of them are free. Here's a key point. Each participant is responsible for obtaining all of their own transportation and accommodations, which means airfare, hotel, etc. And we always recommend getting refundable reservations. So we're not a travel agency, and I'm not going to be making travel plans for people and not even really giving advice for people. That's something you have to do on your own. If you need suggestions or make reservations, just use Expedia, etc. If you want to know how to make a hotel reservation, how do you normally make a hotel reservation? Do you go to Expedia or do you go to I don't know, holidayinn.com. Just do whatever you normally do when you travel. I'm assuming anyone going on this trip has gone on at least one other trip before in their lifetime. So again, that's why we're not collecting any money from you, because you're basically making all your own arrangements. If we go to a museum and you have to buy the tickets ahead of time, we'll provide that information. And then also too, we don't have the exact meeting point for some of the places just yet, but stay tuned for that. As I mentioned before, Dallas-Fort Worth has limited public transportation options, and therefore a car might be helpful. That's the exact opposite of our New York trip. So we're going to New York City later this weekend, or later this week. There, you don't need a car. In Dallas, you probably do. You could get away without one. You could maybe take like the bus or Uber or a Lyft or whatever out to Fort Worth and back. But it'd be a little more, it would require a little more planning, I guess, on your part. I'll put it that way. So you could get by without one, but would be helpful if you had one. Let's see, we'll provide the exact meeting point, example, museum entrance for each activity prior to the trip date. Again, that'll be in the event description. So if there's something obvious that you want to know what the deal is or what the situation is, you would go to the information on the event page. You don't think I would schedule a trip, or we would schedule a trip to go to a museum and not tell you where to meet, would you? So you just kind of have to use common sense. And as with all our programs, there'll be zero tolerance for any inappropriate behavior. One time we had a trip in New York, we actually had to kick someone out of our group because they just started acting crazy. So hopefully no one does that. Let's see, one more page of kind of FYI stuff. So everyone's traveling at their own risk. Again, really recommend people getting refundable reservations for things like hotels. In case something happens, you need to change your plans. Please note this trip being organized by the nonprofit community organization, Washington, D.C. History and Culture. And we're not a travel agency. So it's already taken a fair amount of time for me to organize this trip with a few other people that have helped me. And I don't mind doing that. But what I'm not interested in doing is being like a free travel service / concierge for people that can't take care of things themselves, FYI. Let's see, we'll provide more details when we get a chance. Here's a big thing. If you're a kind of person that needs a lot of hand holding as far as like being able to make travel plans and figure out what to do beyond the information that we've already provided, you're probably better off just going with like a travel agency, because again, I'm not making recommendations on what hotel to stay at, or I'm not going to be picking you up at the airport or stuff like that. You need to do that on your own. So this FYI there also. And then anything that can't be determined on your own by the event description, Google, or common sense, please no. And then finally, please be considerate of our time and read all the trip details before contacting us with questions we've already answered. Again, since we announced the trip to New York and the trip to Dallas, 90% of the people that have contacted us with questions were things that we answered and were discussed in the event description, which is frustrating to have to spend time directing people to that. So keep that in mind. And then one last thing, as far as all the logistical stuff. So you really have to be kind of a self-sufficient traveler to go on one of these programs. So we do as much as we can to set up the itinerary. But what happens when we've done these before is I just get bombarded during the trip with emails and texts and phone calls of things that people should be able to figure out on their own. Like they'll say, are we still going on the walk? Well, if we weren't going on it, we would have let you know. So if we don't let you know, then yes, we're still going on it. Or they'll say, you know, where are we meeting at? Someone's already sent me an email today. Where are we meeting at in New York? It's in the event description. Another time, someone sent me a message asking me if it was going to rain. I don't know. I'm not a meteorologist. Go to the weather.com or something. And then people ask questions like, what's the address for the museum? Or like if in New York, they'll say like, what subway line should I use? You know, those are the kind of things that people can look up their own. And then I hate to do this also, but if you're going to be late, there's not much I can do for you, because what inevitably happens is we have an event scheduled and there's all the people that show up on time. And there's always a handful of people, sometimes more than others, that show up late. And they expect me to be monitoring my phone and my texts and whatever, so that I can navigate them to where we're going to be at 10 minutes after the event started or 15 minutes after the event started. And they say, well, you should be able to do that, Robert, because it only takes a minute or two to help me. Yeah, it only takes a minute or two to help you, but if there's 5 or 10 people that are late, it's gonna take me 10 or 20, 30 minutes to help all these people, and to be honest with you, once the event starts, I'm focused my attention 100% on the people that showed up on time. So you really need to be on time, and if you aren't, you're really gonna be on your own because I'm not gonna be, responding to text messages or phone calls when we're at a museum, because someone couldn't plan ahead. I've done hundreds and hundreds of events the past several years, and I've only been late once, and it was only by about 5 or 4 minutes. So you really need to be on time. This is an adult group, not school children. As I mentioned, if you weren't aware, we're having a trip to New York City later this week. It kicks off on Thursday and it runs through Sunday. If you're in New York City or want to come check us out, it's kind of just like this, except it's in the Big Apple instead of the Big D. And the information on that's on our website. One last reminder, we're Washington, D.C. History and Culture. We're a nonprofit community organization. We try and have all of our programs free. To cover our costs, though, people periodically are generous enough to make donations. And if you ever want to support the work we do, you can do so by PayPal, Venmo, or GoFundMe. As I mentioned before, this program is being recorded. If you joined us late, or if you want to listen to it again, it'll be on our YouTube channel, which is Washington, D.C. History and Culture. It probably won't be posted, though, till tomorrow. So you can be on the lookout for that. I'll email the link for it once it's available, in case you want to listen to it again or share it with anybody else. And that's kind of the scoop for our Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas history and culture trip on Memorial Day weekend 2022. So if you're watching this live, I have a few videos, short videos that I can show you that will kind of give you a little bit more information on some of the sites we're going to see. So if you're watching this on Facebook, I have, or YouTube after the fact, I have to disconnect you. Well, let me rephrase it. If you're watching this on Zoom, sit tight because I'm going to show a few videos that'll give you kind of some more insight on Texas. If you're watching this live on Facebook or a recording on YouTube, I have to disconnect the program because the videos I'm showing, I can't share via those formats because of copyrights by the video owner. So let me pause for 1 second. And thanks so much for joining us.